Good evening, everyone.
Melody, has everybody been admitted?
Yes, everyone's in the meeting.
Fantastic. Jane, I'll go ahead and kick this off for the district and turn it over to you in a minute. But good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Jim Pruitt. I'm the general manager. We scheduled this to be a special meeting for the board to attend and be able to have it as a special meeting so they could all provide input. But unfortunately, we do not have a quorum tonight with the board. So this will not be a special meeting under the Brown Act. We are continuing we'll conduct this simply as a workshop at the staff level. We got a lot of valuable input on their surveys, on phone calls from the last workshop, which we'll go over in a few minutes. And then we'll be seeking your input throughout the presentation on what you may think is important, and also provide you an opportunity to speak on issues that you think are important for the district to address in the next 5 to 10 years. And with that, again, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Jane Gray.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Captain Pruitt. And thank you all commissioners, and welcome to everybody who is joining us this evening. We want to thank you for being here for our second workshop, pulling the information together. Tonight, we will be reflecting back to you what we heard at the last workshop, as well as what we heard through our surveys and interviews. Additionally, as Captain Pruitt indicated, you'll have the opportunity to take part in a number of polls related to the projects. And of course, there's a time reserved for public comment. Our next and last workshop will be in the autumn. And during that workshop, there'll be an opportunity to look at the draft plan. Next slide, please. So this evening's agenda is below. We have introductions, summary of our workshop one last month, summary of surveys and interviews, current district projects, project opportunities that we heard based on the interviews we conducted and the surveys that were also conducted, as well as master plan, mission and values. Then we have public comment. And our final slide is ways to stay connected. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the contours and the workshop. We have about 30 to 40 minutes of slide presentation along with the polling. During the presentation, our project team will have our cameras on. We kindly request that you remain on mute. And if you do have comments, you're welcome to put them in the chat anytime during the presentation. But formally, we ask you to hold your questions till the end, and please raise your hand once we do get to public comment, so we can order you best and make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to share what's on their mind. Next slide, please. So basic introductions. We have Jim Pruitt, General Manager, on the line, John Moran, Melanie Haddon, and the Harbor District Board of Commissioners. Myself, Jane Gray, Asha Blyer with DUDEC, Danielle Berger with DUDEC, Bradley Damitz, Coastal Management Consultant, Bob Sherwood, and Brian Leslie from GHD. Okay. Next, we're moving on to the summary of workshop one, which we held last month on the 13th. Through that workshop, we looked at the chat, we answered a number of questions, and then following on that, we had a number of email correspondence and calls with a variety of stakeholders. And a summary of the comments we received over the course of that workshop, as well as directly following that, are basically a desire for clarity on the district's budget, a desire for more coordination and leveraging of overall opportunities with neighboring jurisdictions, opportunities for visitor serving and income generating opportunities at both Pillar Point and Oyster Point Marina, opportunities for RV parking at Pillar Point, mostly related to fishing communities, the need to upgrade facilities at both of the locations in order to keep a pace of general community expectations, as well as serving recreational and boating needs. At Pillar Point Harbor, we heard kind of loud and clear the need to coordinate, communicate, and recognize needs of those people working in the harbor, as well as those people who are visiting. And the need to understand jurisdictional aspects at Mavericks Beach. Next slide. Our community feedback reflected back some of the same points. We commenced in April, and we talked to loads of folks. We did an online and an in-person survey. We received 282 survey responses, both online and in person. We conducted 29 interviews with key stakeholders and members of the public via Zoom or phone. Within that 282, we spoke to 120 members of the public at Canvas and pop-up events at both Pillar Point and Oyster Point Marina. And we talked to a range of different people throughout the county district commissioners, as well as elected officials and staff, folks at the City of South San Francisco, San Mateo County, City of Half Moon Bay, and we also spoke to the harbor masters at those locations. So in addition to the comments we received, we wanted to provide you a little bit of kind of high-level feedback that we heard from those 300 people over that 2-month period from April to June. Generally at Pillar Point Harbor, we heard that most of the people had been visiting for more than 10 years. The most used amenities at that location were the hiking, biking, and walking trails. Nearly 75% of the people always used those trails or often used those trails. The second most used amenities were the park and green space and Mavericks. Other comments we received were related to the need for improvement, specifically restrooms and parking, and the need to really clarify and understand and communicate better the needs between the working harbor aspects and the tourist serving portions of the harbor. Most people were really satisfied with the amenities, but did indicate that they needed some improvement. We heard from a number of people that there was significant over-harvesting on the reef and of tidal creatures. And sort of along with the discussions related to tidal creatures, just the need for clear communication about what amenities there are at Pillar Point, opportunities for recreation and safety. We heard a suggestion that in order to assuage maybe some of those concerns, it would be helpful to have a visitor or informational center or a kiosk at the harbor. Similarly, we heard a lot of feedback at Oyster Point Marina. I'm going to just read these to you again. A little more than half had been visiting for more than 10 years. It seemed to be used much less in the fall and the winter. It's a little cooler out there and the wind kicks up, so that's completely understandable. The primary reason for visiting Oyster Point was largely the use of the trails and then the boating. There were a number of folks out at the fishing pier, and there were different user groups in each one of those locations. The second most first used amenity is the hiking trails, biking trails, walking, and then the green space. So when we asked more detailed questions related to infrastructure, we heard that people wanted a little bit more lighting out there. There were concerns about safety, not that any incidents had necessarily been reported, but I think just with the increased use over the past year and a half, there seemed to be a little bit more of a concern related to lighting, not being sufficient, uneven pavement, things like that. Of course, the whole site is under redevelopment now. And then just generally, some of the docks needing improvement, and the boating community really wanted to see the fuel dock replaced. Generally, next slide. Generally, we had a need for dredging and more resources. So from those surveys, we pulled out common words, and you can see the larger ones were reflected and spoken more frequently. And this kind of just indicates to you what people's sense of priorities are, what their needs for recreation are. It's just kind of a good visual to give you a sense of what people are experiencing when they're at those locations. So before we move into opportunities for projects that came out of the survey, we did want to provide you a little bit of background on the current and approved district projects. These are all funded presently. I'm going to read these. Tenant Row and Catch Joanne Tenant Row restrooms, RV Park, green space improvements, Oyster Point Marina survey docks 1 to 6, Oyster Point Marina replacement of docks 12, 13, and 14, Surfers Beach restoration harbor dredge project, West Trail shoreline project, enterprise planning, resource system, replacement of vessels and vehicles, master plan, construction administration building, and Oyster Point Marina replacement of navigational aids. So you can see there's quite a lot of projects that are already on the docket for the district to address, and they have been funded. So moving ahead, we'll look at some of the current and approved district projects that are presently unfunded. And these span a number of different infrastructure and trail improvements. Pillar Point Harbor replacement, docks G, F, and E. Johnson Pier reconfiguration, H dock and fuel dock replacement. You can see that that's reflected back in some of the comments we heard from the surveys. Pillar Point Harbor parking lot improvements, again, received comments on that. Access ramp for docks 1 through 6 at Oyster Point Marina. Pillar Point Harbor launch ramp restoration and boat wash. Pillar Point habitat restoration. Pillar Point coastal trail improvement, Oyster Point Marina parcel building, 40,000 square feet, signage and wayfinding programs. So there's obviously a range of different projects that people are interested in seeing and that the district is aware of presently. So now we'll move on to kind of recircling background to what we heard.
When are you going to go into what we're really concerned about? This is terrible.
So I'm going to now circle back around to what we heard.
No,
back.
don't circle back around. Go into the concepts of the fact that some of our boats are sitting at dock getting our bilge pumps flooded with dirt. I was out approximately 23 miles north of the San Francisco Bridge, Golden Gate on the ocean. I got swamped by a wave and my bilge pump did not go on because of the mud or dirt, I should say, clustered into my pump. So I had to actually manually take a 5-gallon bucket and pour the water out of my boat and come back to the.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
This is Jim Pruitt with the district. If I could follow up with you on that, I would love to discuss it further. I'll put my email in the chat and please email me your contact information and I'll contact you and I'll talk to you about that.
Thanks, Captain Pruitt. I'm going to now circle back around to potential project opportunities that we heard back from the community, better sediment management being one of them. So these are ideas that came both from the survey, from the individual interviews that we conducted with stakeholders, elected officials, and Harbor District commissioners. I'm not going to repeat all of them, but to the speaker's point, better sediment management was one of those. Water quality improvements, opportunities for educational outreach and engagement, informational kiosks, floating finger docks, commercial fishing pier, and then management responsibilities.
Jane, should I launch the poll?
Madeline, can you go back a minute, please? Thanks. So as we go through, we have a series now of 4 slides that we're going to go through. And Melanie Hatton has put together some polls. And each poll is going to correspond to each one of these slides. I read through the project. We're going to give you 2 minutes to take the poll for each of the following slides. And 2 minutes isn't really long time. I understand that. So we are also making available to you a link to a survey. We'll put that in the chat at the end of the meeting. But if you are comfortable taking that survey, that poll right now, we'll be able to get some immediate outcomes. And so for this slide, you can pick the 3 projects at Pillar Point that you think are really the highest priority. Again, informational kiosk, regular educational opportunities, RV park for the fishing community, better sediment management, water quality improvement projects, district expansion of management responsibilities, the new commercial fishing pier, temporary seasonal floating finger docks. So go ahead and indicate your preferences on this slide, and we'll give you about 2 minutes. About 1 more minute. And again, don't feel rushed. We will give you an opportunity after this workshop through another same survey questions over the next 2 weeks to fill it out. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, so thank you for taking that poll. Melanie, we can close that and we'll provide everybody with the results. So it looks like the top 3 projects indicated on this webinar anyway are water quality improvements at 60%, better sediment management at 50%, RV park for fishing community also at 50%. But we're going to record all of these and provide you some feedback as well. And again, we will release the link to the Survey Monkey at the end of the meeting as well as tomorrow. So the next set of projects are also for Pillar Point. You can go ahead and switch the slide, please. Thank you. Again, these are also for Pillar Point Harbor, reflected back from what we heard on the surveys. Those are habitat and native plant restoration, permanent restrooms on the West Trail, visitor serving business and educational opportunities, increased collaboration, coordination with the CRI, which is the Coastside Recovery Initiative, fuel dock upgrades, marine service repair facilities, and recreational activities. So you have 2 minutes to fill out this poll. Another 30 seconds on this slide. And again, we have a survey following this workshop. It'll be put in the chat. We know that 2 minutes isn't that long. So you'll have an opportunity to take the same survey over the next 2 weeks. It'll close on August 25th. Okay, thank you, Melanie. Let's go ahead and see what our feedback is. So again, the 3 projects that are prioritized per this discussion are permanent restaurant rooms at the West Trail, increased collaboration with jurisdictions, and then habitat and native plant restoration projects. Maureen's, go ahead, thanks. The next slide, again, will have a poll, again, to elicit your thoughts on projects that we heard from our outreach. This is related to Oyster Point Marina Park. Fewer projects here, but they include a new fuel dock, increased ferry capacity, a coffee shop or a store, additional commuter ferry service, a new bait shop, and additional visitors serving businesses and educational opportunities. So you have 2 minutes on this as well. So we have another minute on this. Okay, go ahead, Melanie, and you can provide us with the outputs here. So this again was 3 projects that you think the Harbor District should focus on at Oyster Point. The top 3 are the fuel dock, increased recreational activities, and then it looks like we have a pretty good tie between ferry capacity, coffee shop, and additional commuter ferry service. So thank you for providing that on these individual locations. Again, we're just eliciting your feedback on some of the things we've already heard from you. And if you haven't had an opportunity to take the survey, you'll have another opportunity over the next 2 weeks. The next slide is polling on both locations. So we heard a lot of feedback related to both Oyster Point and Pillar Point, just overall, not specific to location. So Melanie, would you mind putting that poll up for us, please? Thank you. And for this one, if you could just select one project. You can go ahead and take 2 minutes. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, Melanie. So there seems to be a lot of consensus around bridge management plans. And then the second, sea level rise planning. Thank you. So we got some initial feedback tonight, and we really appreciate that very much. Again, over the next 2 weeks, we'll be sharing that survey. And then we will provide you with an overall summary. So the outcomes both from the surveys that we had this evening, as well as the more general survey for with the same questions for folks that weren't able to join us tonight, or if you have other thoughts on items you'd like to share. Madeline has put the Oyster Point Marina link in the chat. We will also be sending out both of these surveys via the stakeholder list. It'll also be posted on the website. And again, that's open this evening right now. It'll be open tomorrow all the way until August 25th. Okay. So as we're getting your feedback, and I'm sure we'll have more conversation during the public comment session of this, related to questions or comments or further thoughts on the priorities that you all indicated, we did want to take you through sort of an understanding of the rubric and evaluation upon which these projects will be viewed. So next slide, please. So the master plan obviously is built on a strategic plan. The district currently has an operating set of criterion and a rubric to view projects. The master plan project opportunities and evaluation process will mirror that largely. And the rubric that we're using is a pretty straightforward set of criteria. Those criterion are here. District legal obligations and agreements. We want to make sure that the projects that move forward and are ultimately selected are in alignment with the district's legal agreements and obligations. We want to make sure that the projects achieve the mission, vision, and core values of the master plan, that they are planned and implemented with community input, that there is an opportunity and comment and broad community benefit, that the district is authorized to move forward in their responsibilities, that the projects are compatible with adjacent agencies. And so this gets to the point that we've discussed before on leveraging different agencies and closer coordinating and communicating on projects and opportunities. Also, another criterion is physical site constraints and considerations, sea level rise. So as this becomes more of an issue both at Pillar Point and at Oyster Point Marina, project considerations need to take physical site constraints under advisement. And then of course, there's budgetary constraints. So the next section of this presentation, I'll turn over to Asha to walk you through the master plan vision, mission, vision, and core values.
Great, thank you, Jane. Yeah, so for this slide, we're showing here the mission, vision, and core values that we've drafted for this master plan process. And I wanted to just note that these are, of course, inspired from and consistent with the strategic plan. The strategic plan is really the district's highest level planning document. It represents the commission's direction for the future, really serves as a programmatic framework for decision making. That document is more at a 80,000 feet view in comparison to this master plan, which will serve more at a 10,000 feet view, providing guiding principles, policies, specific projects unique to Pillar Point Marina and Oyster Point Marina. So I'll just take a pause here, and you can all review the vision and the core values, the mission statement really being the overarching statement and vision of the master plan. So I'll go ahead and read that. The mission of the San Mateo County Harbor District Master Plan is to create a comprehensive guide that will focus district activities in a relevant, responsive, and realistic manner. And again, we will be opening up for discussion and taking Q&A and comments, but we wanted to make sure we got through a lot of this informational material for you for context. So we have the mission statement. The vision is the San Mateo County Harbor District identifies and achieves capital improvement projects that balance recreational and commercial use, public access for residents and visitors, and environmental stewardship for future generations. And then you have the core values listed here as well. And next slide, please. So here we wanted to give you an idea of what the master plan is going to look and feel like. We're planning to divide it into 5 chapters. Chapter 1, the executive summary, will be really an overview of the mission, the vision, really the purpose of the master plan, setting up the framework and the expectations. It'll touch on the community engagement that's been happening throughout the process, and also described kind of the preferred plan elements. Chapter 2 is going to be the background, purpose, vision statement, and guiding principles. So that's really going to be kind of expanding on the slide that was just previously presented. Chapter 3 is going to be the preferred plan and implementation. So that's going to be, we're actually going to have separate sections for Pillar Point and Oyster Point, and we will be going through each of those respectively for their unique guiding principles and policies and projects. And all of the engagement that's occurred to date, as well as this workshop today, all of the feedback that we're going to get in just a few minutes when we open for discussion, and the results of the surveys, the polling that we did today, but also the survey that's going to be available through August 25th, in addition to all the future conversations we're going to have, is all going to be analyzed, evaluated, and then encapsulated into this chapter 3. So that's really the core chapter of the master plan. Chapter 4 is going to be the existing conditions analysis. That was presented at workshop 1. It provides kind of an overview of the marinas, the facility conditions surveys that were conducted. And then chapter 5 is going to be a summary of the public outreach and engagement efforts that have occurred throughout the entire planning process. Next slide, please. So again, I mean, there are lots and lots of ways to stay connected. We're always open to, feedback and collecting, the vision and goals and priorities, and those that the community feels, what they would like us to consider. That's a very, very important part of this master plan preparation process. So as you know, we're on public workshop number 2, and the next public workshop will be the 3rd, held in the fall. And listed here is the website for the master plan, a contact email address, as well as a phone number. As soon as we have the dates for the 3rd public workshop, we will make sure to submit those and get that out for everyone to plan accordingly. We'll have the survey that will follow this workshop, and that will be similar to the same actually as the polls that were just conducted. And then we will actually be soliciting comments on the plan once it's drafted. So there will still be opportunities to comment on the plan once it's in its draft form. All right, and thank you so much for your time today. We know the time is valuable, and we really appreciate you being here with us. And with that, we'll go ahead and open it up for comment and questions. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jane to help facilitate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asha. And thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time. Tried to make this an effective and efficient presentation tonight. So if you do have comments, we welcome your comments. Welcome any thoughts you have on the projects that were shared. Again, those projects are a direct reflection of what we heard back over the survey and over interviews with stakeholders and commissioners and harbor masters. So if you want to raise your hand, and I see a hand up, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And Mr. Dinowitz.
Thank you. I really appreciate having this open forum, and thank you very much for having this. I would like to say that my hope is that the commissioners will take the broad view of what is beneficial for the total community, including significant concerns about habitat degradation and wildlife protection. I recognize that that those using and most interested in the harbor are most focused and interested in their needs and uses, but environmental stewardship is critical, which is stated as a core value of the commission. And we don't have a second opportunity once we degrade and lose the habitat, and we're at a very critical junction. So I encourage the commissioners to really put that as a high consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dinowitz. Are there any other questions or comments? Feel free to raise your hand. Ms. Brennan, you have 3 minutes.
First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak and just say that this is no way to run a public process. The public should be able to give input at every point of this process. And we covered a lot of ground. A lot was covered in the surveys and descriptions of current projects and potential future projects. And there is no way to cover all of that in 3 minutes. So I'm calling BS on this, and this does not feel like a transparent process and a process that welcomes public input. So super disappointed with all of you that have organized this process. But having said that, I would just say that there was a lot left out. So there are key things that need to get addressed and were not discussed in any sort of level of detail this evening. And a master plan is a detailed plan. It's not an overview. It actually could have quite a lot of content that could help guide the district towards better opportunities for the public, for the commercial fishing industry, for the recreational fishing industry. There are just so many things that this plan could potentially do to serve San Mateo County residents and visitors. And the way that things are being handled here this evening do not give me much hope. I had planned to make a lot of specific comments, but at this point, I'm so completely disgusted. I will reserve all of that for a future letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? I don't see anybody's hand raised.
Jane, I'd like to say a few things.
Yes, go ahead.
We received the condition surveys on both Oyster Point and on Pillar Point. And there's some, I don't know if I would say surprising, but it does document some needed repairs or needed further investigation to ensure the safety of the visitors and our facilities. And you saw some of those pictures tonight on the slideshow. One picture of some broken concrete and which caused not only a tripping hazard, but it also was there's another patch of broken concrete that caused an electrical hazard. And we've repaired both of those sections. The breakwater or the shoreline next to the Johnson Pier Head behind the restrooms there at the head of Johnson Pier was wasting away pretty good and causing a hazard to the concrete slab above. So we've repaired that too and put in new rock to prevent that from happening. We've also hired a contractor, an engineering firm, to come in and do further studies on the concrete pilings of Johnson Pier, as they were noted to be some pilings to be overstressed. So we want to address that and make sure the pier is safe for the traffic that is on board. With respect to the traffic on Johnson Pier, we recently repaired some of the pilings under the working flat. We put concrete sleeves around them to extend their life and the safety of the working flat. We issued the Johnson Pier Safety Plan, which limits the number of vehicles and trucks on Johnson Pier and where the semi trucks can park and when they can and how they operate on our pier to prevent further overstressing. And they're no longer allowed to drive all the way out to the end of the pier where the overstressing has been noted to be occurring. So we've addressed those issues too, and we're awaiting for that report. The electrical on John Johnson Pier, we know, is insufficient to operate all the electrical demands, especially of the fish buying companies at the end of the pier. So we're looking into how we can increase the power out to the end of the pier and how to fund that in the near future. That way, the companies will be able to operate all their equipment and be able to safely offload squid and other seafood without bringing out additional generators, which again causes more load onto the pier itself. And then we do regular maintenance of the west trail or the coastal trail that goes through the harbor, patching the gopher holes and trying to prevent that from wasting away, especially on top of the hill above Half Moon Bay Kayak, where it's starting to, through normal weather patterns and water runoff, has caused the trail to deteriorate in that location. And we're working on repairing that also. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Captain Pruitt. We have a hand up from Ito.
Sorry, I was muted. This is Edmundo Lorenas. I'm a commissioner on the San Mateo County Harbor District. I'd just like to ask a few questions. First, with respect to the surveys, can you tell us how you hope to use this information? Because I found some of the items a little bit confusing. For example, the sediment management questions, there were 2 of them on the survey. And really, sediment management within the harbor would be our responsibility. If the other one was outside of the harbor, that's not really within our jurisdiction necessarily. We can support it, but we can't really do much about it. And it was confusing to me because it seemed like those are related and should be one item. And the questions seem to set up the weird false equivalencies. So for example, collaborating with different jurisdictions, I think most of the public might agree with that, but it's not, if you're asking us to pick 3 items, then how do you do that with respect to something that's a process like collaboration, and the other is fixing a pier or dredging? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So maybe you could explain that to us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I understand the distinction between process and actual infrastructure projects. So the feedback again was from some of the surveys, but as we move forward with the overall plan, we're evaluating essentially everything that has been reflected back to us, everything that people have indicated that they're concerned about. We're recording, again, the frequency at which we hear it. And then we will be providing an evaluation process. So we'll go through sort of a fine screening process to identify which process-oriented items are of high priority, which infrastructure items are of high priority, and then weighing them against the priorities and rubric that the district uses. So as it relates to projects, that's a very straightforward process. As it relates to process or infrastructure, that's a very straightforward process. As it relates to relationship building, that has a different time component to it, and should be viewed really with the same sort of import that a project moves forward, but does need to be identified as to a timeline, who's taking charge of those relationships, what relationships exist and how those can be advanced and nuanced. So we're essentially looking at, all the scenarios as we move forward with the plan, and really just hoping in this workshop to get your feedback on this. So I appreciate that comment, Commissioner Lorenas. I think it's important, and I'm sorry if it was confusing. Are there any other comments that you'd like to provide?
Yes. Maybe would have been a little better to put all the infrastructure questions in one list and the process questions in another, so that when you're asked to pick 3 out of a list of 5 or 6, you're not trying to prioritize a process with respect to an infrastructure. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's one comment. And the other is, there are items that are on these lists that are politically complicated, financially complicated. And so an example of that would be the fuel dock. Listing a fuel dock versus something that's relatively easy infrastructure for us, something that's the responsibility of the district versus the responsibility of South San Francisco. Again, you're asking us to compare or rank things that are not anywhere nearly equivalent to each other. The fuel dock question has a lot to do with our relationship with South San Francisco, which we can't get into here. So to ask the public to rank that versus, say, the coastal trail that's in South San Francisco, that doesn't make a lot of sense. There's got to be a lot of context to these questions.
Thank you. Those are salient points.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Not at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Fran Pollard.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm Fran Pollard in El Granada, and I'm disappointed that the Surfers Beach project isn't on the survey. I don't think many people saw the plan. I think you already adopted it or something, and I've spoken about this before. So I'm hoping in the next survey you put it back in the survey so people can comment. I've said before, I asked to be informed about it when you were going to discuss it, and I was not. And so it got passed, and I didn't know anything about it. And I don't think anybody here in El Granada knows anything about it, because I've asked a few people. They didn't even know. You did not hold a real public hearing on it. And it really affects a lot of us, especially the parking. You've taken away parking. And I've told you that the people, surfers need the parking, and it's across from El Granada, where everybody thinks they can park in the Burnham Strip across from on the highway. But that's not, El Granada should not be the parking for the harbor. The harbor has to planned parking. And I don't like the response I got last time that, well, there's always been a problem of parking. And so that's the way it goes or something. You don't take away, you need to add parking. And I think there's still time, since it's only been planned, no construction started, nothing's going on. I think people need to know that they're not going to be able to park in the Burnham Strip, because that's becoming a park for the community. And the parking lot, that illegal parking lot that's been there, is not going to be there any longer. So you need to provide more parking. And I hope you put that plan on the next survey so we can comment now and others can comment. And outside of that, I think the pier needs to be taken care of. That's probably the most serious thing. Where it's poor and in serious conditions, that needs to be taken care of. And the one project I really like is the West Shore project. So I'm happy with that one. But again, I hope you put Surfers Beach back on.
Thank you very much. Our next commenter is John Olam. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to, hopefully you will discuss a little bit about the situation as pertains to funding repairs. John, in that
We can't hear you.
money to fund almost everything.
Mr. Olam, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We lost you for a little bit. Would you mind starting your comments over? We still can't hear you. Mr. Olam, it looks like you're not on mute, but we're unable to hear you. Do we have any other commenters at this time? Mr. Olam, are you able to maybe call back in? You can hear us. We'll follow up with you after the meeting, or please feel free to send us an email or let us know when you'd like to arrange a call, and we would like to hear your comment. I don't see any other hands up. Are there other people who'd like to share this evening? Okay, I don't see any other hands up. So at this time, if folks don't have anything in the chat that they'd like to have responded to, I do see a number of questions. Some of them have been answered. One of them, I'm not sure has been answered, is the Harbor District Commission's Wildlife Protection Committee still active?
We don't have an active commission or committee on that right now. However, there's further down in the chat, I've been requested to relay to the board that certain members of the public would like that commission to be reestablished, and I will do that.
Thank you, Captain Pruitt. I do see Mr. Ullum's hand is back up. John, are you able to share now? You're on mute.
How about now?
We can hear you now.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for
putting
being
up.
persistent.
No, but thank you. I'm moving around here, it's still at work. Yeah, what I was discussing is the lack of funding for dealing with items like the repair at Johnson Pier and many of the other repairs that need to be done. If somebody were to take the time to read the status reports of the infrastructure at both the marina and at the harbor, you'd see that there's quite a bit of work that's way behind. And if you look at the funding, it appears that the only real priorities so far are to buy a new building or to buy the building you're currently renting, and to fund improvements out at Oyster Point for docks that you're not really sure if will pay for themselves. And so I'm wondering, if there's any kind of going to be some time put aside to discuss how this actually gets financed, how things could be financed differently. Do we have to take loans out? Do we have to sell bonds? Do we have to reprioritize? Obviously, when you have reports telling you that your key piece of infrastructure is pretty much in danger of falling into the ocean eventually. I mean, if you don't do a repair out there at the end of the dock where all the trucks and the heavy weight are, you've already been warned that that's already structurally deficient out there. I'm sure there's a lot of boards and whatnot that have these kind of conversations. I'm sure they went on at the Surfside condo when you've got concrete that's cracking and rebar that's rusting, and you're starting to put in, fix-its like wood jacketing. There doesn't seem to be any worry about that, or any kind of concern that someone might get hurt or this might be put off until it's too late. There's no one talking about reallocating funds. You might want to talk about the grant process, how long it would take, how many grants you would need to fund. I believe it's up to $16 million now to get Johnson Pier back to where you want. And of course, then there's the fuel dock, which is way behind and is in danger of having to be shut down. One of the reports mentioned that there were a lot of damage due to chemical wear and tear on different surfaces. And eventually that's going to go down, and that would bring operations out there to a grinding halt. You've already lost the fuel dock out there at Oyster Point. It seems to me like we need to talk about priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ullum. Mr. Haggerty?
Yes, thank you. I want to echo some of the concerns of Commissioner Ed Lorenas. With some of these questions, wasn't really clear on ramifications of each, what the full plans are, and what is the conditions of the fuel dock. So it was difficult, but I just chose what I thought was best off the surface. Would be better to know a little bit about more of the ramifications of each choice. Would have been better, I think. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Do we have any other hands up? I don't see any hands up. So is there anybody else that would like to share? And looking through the chat, it appears that the questions that have been posed have been answered. So I'll give everybody just another minute to raise a hand. So at this time, if there aren't any other hands up, our follow-up here is really to provide the next opportunities for the survey. As stated, we will be revisiting for the next 2 weeks between the 11th of August and the 25th of August, those projects. We understand that there's concern about process-related items and infrastructure-related items, so we can address that in the forthcoming survey. Also, feel free to email the master plan email at any time and let us know what your thoughts are. You know, these are educational for you and also for us. We're here to listen to you and ensure that the feedback you're providing does get incorporated into the master plan moving forward. So please understand that we take all your comments seriously. They've all been constructive, and we will recalibrate based on the comments, and happy to split out priorities based on process-oriented items and infrastructure-oriented items. I believe we put one of the surveys in the chat. If you didn't get that, you will receive an email. It will also be on the Harbor District's website. Mr. Lorenas?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say a few words about this to the public. It's very important, even if you might find this a little frustrating, it's very important for us to, as commissioners and for staff, to get your input. Please go to our website to look for information. If staff will be trying to make the information easier to find within our websites. If you can't find something, feel free to email the general manager or even call the district and ask for them to provide it to you. It's our job. We should try to give you as much context and information as possible. You know, work within your frustration, go past it and look for the information. You can call me. My phone number is accessible through the website, and just keep at it. We really need your input. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So again, next steps are the workshop that will be convened in the autumn, the survey that you will receive a link to via email. It will also be on the district website. And please feel free to contact us via the master plan email or the phone number on the website. So if there isn't anything else, we'd like to thank all of you for your time. Appreciate your comments, the chat, and your presence here this evening.